Hi folks, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be looking at the weekly meta breakdown for the Explorer format for the regional qualifiers this month for the championship. It's Pioneer, so pretty close to Explorer, not 100%, but there is, like, I'm testing for it. I'm going to be running Gruul Prowess, Burn, whatever you want to call it. So I'm doing my practice with that. So I thought we'd take a look to see what's happening in Explorer and see what's winning in the terms of deck lists and stuff like that. As always, we get the data from UntapGG, what you see on the screen. Companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, aggregates user win rates, gives a whole bunch of cool stats, tracks your own win rates. So if you want to use Untap, the link is in the video description below. I'll timestamp and paste all the deck lists so you can take a look and go from there. And yeah, we'll jump in. We're going to look at the popularity of decks today, and then we'll look at the win rates of the decks themselves. For popularity of the dates, because this is May 1st that I'm recording, Platinum is where everybody reset after the season reset, so we're going to be looking Platinum to Mythic. There's really no stats coming in at Diamond at this point, still fairly early. And then for the actual win rates, we're going to be looking at the last week of the month with the Diamond to Mythic rank to see what's working for folks in that regard. So for popularity of the decks, fairly flat in terms of the format, I will say. Zori's Control is the highest at 11.5%. You have Rakdos Vampires about 10.5%. Phoenix at about 10%. Izzet Ensoul about 9%. We have Amalia that's also coming in at like 7-ish%. Mono Black Discard, the Waste Not deck, Gruul Burn. So you have a kind of a fairly flat 5 to 10%, or even less than 10%, like 5% kind of variance between the actual decks themselves. Something kind of funny here. One of my friends who we play in like the same LGS, we played together, actually made the list this time. So one thing to kind of note here, like with Izzet Ensoul, his deck's not Ensoul, it's Izzet Wizards. So we can kind of take a look at that when we get to the burn page, but it looks like it's categorizing it as well. In terms, he's still working on the list, so I'm sure once he can, it's a better idea. But he was running that. We were kind of going back and forth between Gruul Burn or like Izzet Wizards, Mono Red Wizards, kind of going from that from a testing perspective for our RC. So we'll jump into it. We have Diamond and Mythic rank, 17,000 games, highest win rate deck, 5-color Transmogrify, which is really Rakdos Transmog. So kind of the core of this deck is you're transmogrifying a token into a Traxa. This deck's been popular. I beat up, like, I've only run into it once. I had a pretty like easy matchup against it. I don't like these all-in-ones personally because against control, they have a lot of ways to kind of get you. It's easy for them to hit a Traxa. It's just a singular threat, but it seems to be doing well. People are playing it. I welcome your thoughts on it. I just personally don't like the all-in kind of approach to it, but it's kind of like a Rakdos control-y deck. You still have like your Duresses, Fatal Pushes, Thoughtseize, various removal spells, Bankbuster in here. You can animate the Bankbuster and also transmogrify it. You make tokens with Fable, Omnixless, or Case of the Stash Skeleton. Skeleton's kind of cool because it makes you your target, but then also goes and finds you. Like, if your target dies, then, well, you just go and become Stemotic Tutor to find whatever piece you're missing. Myrix in the mana base and Mutavault, as well as Sokazan as ways to kind of transmogrify. Got the companion, sideboard, just hand hate, removal, big mana, kind of multiple spells, licensors for graveyard hate, and then we have like Go Blanks, Hitazukus, and Extinction Events. So just kind of various removal spells in there. We then go to Amalia. This is probably one of the most popular decks. Some interesting tech in this particular one that we're seeing from the new set. So the core of the combo, if you haven't seen it by this point, like, this is one of the go-to pillars of the format. Amalia, Wild Growth Walker, anything that gains a life on ETB, or ways to gain life, Innkeeper, Lunarch Veteran, an attack from, I don't know, where is it? Deep Cavern Bat. Basically, will create a loop where you keep gaining life through exploring. Amalia gets 20 life, kills everything else. You can set it up where you basically put the Aetherflux Reservoir on top of your deck through the Explore triggers, so even if they kill the Amalia, you can still just 50 them afterwards. There's a lot of resiliency with the deck. And ways to tutor, Court of Calling, Collected Company, Rally to the Ranks. And then you have stuff like Extraction Specialist to also find or rebuy stuff. This list is playing a couple new cards. We have Lively Dirge. This is a card I keep passing in draft. I just don't like it, but it seems to be reasonable here. So 2 mana +1, so 3 mana, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, and then for 5 mana, cumulative. So it's kind of like double entomb and then reanimate. So you could bring back 2 pieces, which is kind of interesting. And then you have Ruthless Lawbringer as it's basically a sack something else, kill something, and this is any non-land permanent, so it's a nice way to deal with various types of hate pieces that your opponent might bring in. Sideboard, just removal options like Artifact Enchantment hate, Hand hate. Knight of Dusk Shadow is basically the mirror tech. You stop your opponent from getting life. Graveyard hate counters like Storm decks, like Phoenix in a way. I guess you kind of categorize Phoenix as somewhat Storm. You're casting a bunch of spells. Ordain for big mana. If they're doing a lot of anti-life gain, you have Sentinel for fair game. Welcoming Vampire for like the grindier matchups, and Vraska could be brought in to deal with like a lot of the various removal spells. So with Gruul Burn, there is a number of kind of variants of the deck. There's what we're going to be looking at right here, which I would categorize as the Wizard's Burn deck. So it is Gruul in the sense that it is mono red splash green. The mana base in this particular list is not very good. If you want to play this version of the list, I'll show you my version right after. Just copy that mana base. You shouldn't be playing Rockvale. You should be playing a full set of Copperline Gorge. You should be playing the Painline Carpusin Forest as well. The Wizard's package is get 2 Lava Runner. Swift Spear is not a wizard, but you have Soulscar Mage and then Slickshot in here. So that enables you to have Wizard's Lightning, which is a 1 mana bolt, pairing with Skewer and light up the stage. Some of these versions where they typically don't play a Questing Druid at all. Some are also playing 3 mana Chandra as a way to enable the spectacle through the ping that it brings. So there's that version. Sideboards are fairly similar. For the Convoke matchup, pick your poisons, very good against anything playing like enchantments, artifacts, or just against like Bane Rippers or Atraxos comes in handy. Something I learned in my match. Your opponent is still playing the version of Smuggler's Copter. Smuggler Copter, they crew it in response, they sack their Smuggler's Copter instead of their Bane Ripper. You go from ha ha ha, I have your answer for 1 mana to Bane Ripper to basically conceding the game at that point. For grindier matchups, Questing Druid, case very, very good. I really, really like the case. Just gives you another like grind element against the mono black decks, even against control. This helps me like get a lot of utility and value. Anti-life gain with Ferocidon, and then Witchstalker as additional removal. So the version I am playing, I'm going to be playing pretty much locked into this. Overall, like at least track, I didn't count 1 loss against the Vampires deck, so I'm 7-1 with it. I have a full video on this if you want to see how to play the deck, how I approach it, stuff like that. Definitely check that out. We played against that Transmogrify deck, we played against Vampires, and we played against Jeskai Gearhulk, which is basically like a control deck, like blue-white control splash, some red in there. So this version is the Prowess version. So you'll see this version as well. And then there's also a mono red burn version. I think the green splash will pick your poison is really good. I personally am a fan of this version. I like having the protection spells. It's playing more of a tempo-oriented game. The one thing I find with like these all-in burn ones, and like if you've watched the channel long enough, you know I love mono red. So I'm saying this with a heat of caution. You have a lot of cards like Monstrous Rage and stuff like that that are only good if you actually have a creature. They're dead cards in like the Rakdos Vampire matchup at times. They have a lot of removal. Anything that's like overboarding against blue-white control, you don't want to have so many of these pump effects. The Blossoming Defense really helps protect, where you can plot your, say, Slickshot Show-Off or your Picnic Ruiner or whatever it is, and then have the protection spell up to kind of blow out your opponent. It lets you kind of go all in and then do that big burst damage. So I'm on 2 Blossoming Defense and 2 Audacities. I was trying out Royal Treatment. I switched to Snakeskin Veil. So while Royal Treatment is better in a vacuum because the Royal roll gives ward after, it's actually somewhat of a non-bow with Monstrous Rage because they supersede each other. A creature can only have 1 roll on it at a time. So the counter from Snakeskin Veil is better. So that's the kind of switch I would make. if you are playing this deck. You have your Tarkus command in here. Tarkus command is also kind of low-key really good because it can shut off your opponent's life gain. So against Amalia, you have a main deck answer to shut off the combo. In addition, you could also pump their creature. You can pump their Amalia beyond 20 life, and it creates a loop which resolves in a draw. In terms of sideboard, I have Red Cap Melee. The deck's fairly popular on the ladder, so just having an answer to it. I like Red Cap. In a pinch, you could bring it in other matchups. You would have to sacrifice a land if you don't target a red creature, but in a pinch, you can use it. Rending Volleys, pick your poisons in here. I think more than likely I'm going to be either dropping a Rending Volley for the third case, or I'm going to play the fourth pick your poison. The reason being, against control, against the grindier matchups, this removal doesn't typically come in, and I want one more grind element, and I think it's going to be another copy of the case. I really, really like this card. Ferocidon, Witchstalker Frenzy. So in Explorer, I'm playing in Licensors because Phoenix and Graveyard decks are more prominent. In Pioneer, the Mageborn Lizard is something that gets played, the 1/4 from the most recent set. It's good against Lotus Field combo. You're not really seeing those types of decks in this format, so that's why I'm not playing that particular deck, that card in here. Then move on, we go to Izzet Ensoul. So this is the actual Izzet list, so 74%. So this is an artifact-themed deck. You have just things like Case of the Flitched Falcon. To animate, you have Cryptic Coat, but you have like the Ensoul artifact package with Darksteel. Cheap artifacts, Siren makes an artifact, Voldaren makes an artifact. Gleaming Gear Drake gets bigger. You have Shrapnel Blast to throw extra damage. Inti with these big creatures can give Trample. Looter Scooter to kind of toss away the extra stuff as well. In your sideboard, just various removal tempo element cards, Roiling Vortex, Ferocidon, Hazard for the grandier matchups. Hazard's not as great as it once was, like in theory, against blue-white control, because all their removal's pretty much exile-based. Even some of the blue-white control decks I've seen go up to Sunfall, just kind of dealing with that. Sunfall's better against the Vampires deck because it doesn't kill at exiles. Leyline's an interesting one. I don't like Leyline in decks that can't easily... I guess with Smuggler's Copter you can loot it, but you do have to kind of have it in your opener. Especially being an artifact deck, you may... So the consideration here is, in theory, the artifact like Soul Guide Lantern or Unlicensed Hearse is better. This deck is very soft to Brotherhood's End, so that might be a reason why they're opting to go with Leyline here. Throwing War to steal like the big things of like Vein Ripper and stuff. We then have Izzet Phoenix, 73%. So this version here is the Prof's Eidetic Memory. So every time you draw extra cards, you get to put counters on your creatures at combat. So basically draw discard style effects to get your Phoenix into the graveyard, self-milling with like Picklock Prankster, cast 3 spells, get back the Arclight Phoenix, Treasure Cruise, basically 1 mana, draw 3 cards. Sweetheart from Brazen Borrower here, in addition to that. Sideboard, just more kind of creatures to kind of play around the anti-graveyards, counter spells, young Pyromancer. So just kind of differentiating your threats if your opponent's bringing a lot of graveyard hate. Ashiok's good against Amalia combo, as well as Phoenix Mirrors. The one thing I never understood, why Anger the Gods in a deck with Phoenix? I would think Brotherhood's End would be better. If there's like regular Phoenix players, make this make sense to me, because this just seems like a non-bo. Killing your Phoenix isn't the end of the world, but exiling it is. Seems kind of odd to me. Like even the split having one of each. Rakdos Vampires. So one of the more prevalent decks, very, very strong kind of 1-2 punch. You have the Sorin that can cheat into play Vein Ripper, Fable, just a very, very powerful card on its own right. So you can do the fair game plan. Some of the lists are playing the 2-mana vampire with kicker that can reanimate Lifelink Menace. Some people are trying that out as well. I forget the name, the one that can reanimate. So that's one that can be seen some play. You're seeing some versions play Archfiend in here as just another kind of alternate win condition as well. You have like Grind Elements and Bankbuster. The Spyglass Glass is an interesting one. You probably just, I would imagine Pithing Needle would be better. Nixus for the grindier matchups, aggro, like very lean. You have Path to Peril, Extinction Event, Leyline in the Void for graveyard decks, and then Quakebringer for the Amalia combo. We then go to an interesting version of Boros Convoke. So seeing the Regal Bunnicorn in this version, Containment Priest is a card that's been an uptick in play, it deals with like Vein Ripper, stuff like that. But this deck's basically creates something that makes an artifact, Lethal Demolition, Convoke, get some value out of it that way, and then overrun your team. This sideboard looks a little bit dated. You should be playing Get Lost instead of Declaration in Stone, I would say. But otherwise, looks fairly reasonable. The Knockout Blow is an interesting one. It is kind of a reasonable card if you're running into a lot of mono red, but at the same time, just playing like actual hard removal might be better. Ferocidon's in here for anti-life gain, like we mentioned. Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate. We then have Mono White Humans, which is seeing a bit of an uptick again, 67%. And like I mentioned, the Containment Priest, just human synergies, Thalia's Lieutenant to put counters on your whole squad. And then like Adelins to go wide, Brutal Cathar as removal, utility lands, you have Cavern for Uncounterable in there as well. Interesting to see like the number of declarations over Get Lost, Portable Hold, cheap removal, invasion, and like a hand hate. Notably, no graveyard hate in the sideboard. I would definitely be playing 1 to 2 copies probably of some sort of graveyard hate. Peacekeeper's tax effect, Wedding Announcement for the grindier matchups, super heavy matchups as well. And then lastly, Mono Black Discard, Mono Black Waste Not. So the big kind of recent cards that got added is Karavek. There's a lot of ways to do crime in this deck, targeted discard, stuff like that. So it lets you rebuy and recycle stuff from your graveyard. So it gives you that other element. Waste Not triggers off any sort of discard, gives you a whole bunch of utility. Otherwise, it's like a mono black mid-range control style shell. You have access to Sunken Citadel, which reduces the cost of activated abilities of your lands. So you have like Hive of the Eye Tyrants cheaper. Dire Reach Sanitarium is kind of the combo, where on your opponent's upkeep, you could force them, if they have no cards in hand, force them to draw and discard. They don't get or they would still get the other draw. Sorry, that's with Narset that it works that way. But basically, the downside with this deck is typically Waste Not doesn't do anything if your opponent's Hellbent, but this forces at least a draw and discard even if they are. Various kind of hit pieces, Tiny Bones, in kind of put some pressure, but eats at your opponent's graveyard. Various types of graveyard hate, hand hate, some other creatures in here. Invoke Despair to go over the top and have you have an answer to some enchantments as well. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think. I will link my mono or like my Gruul list. I'm going to be working on a sideboard guide for that as well as I play it a bit more. But let me know what you think. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.